Yeah. Yo, listen. Sat down with my son for breakfast and he had some questions. I said I got answers for anything that you can ask me. He said I feel like I'm treated different, feeling special. I said you're only 16, life is gonna test you. So what's the problem, my son? Tell me what's on your mind. He said I don't think I wanna go to school anymore. I feel left out, I'm kinda stretched out. I need a break. It's only so.
Welcome back to the Hip Hop African Podcast. We are doing a special series of episodes that are being recorded live with African Studies students from Howard University and George Washington University. We are teaming up for this series with Words, Beats, and Life, which is also live streaming the episodes on Wednesday evenings on their Facebook page at facebook.com/Words, Beats, Life. You can find the full schedule on our site, hiphopafrican.com. I want to thank you, MOA, for joining us. I know it's late there, and I know, you are kind of going through some things there, and I don't want to, put your business out there, but I want to definitely thank you for joining us this evening, and we will definitely try not to hold you for too long.
Word. Thank you so much. I just want to shout you out for being one of the pioneers of hip hop, African hip hop. I know we go way back, and I gotta also shout out Do Me Right for reminding me that I got you at my fingertips. So you're a trailblazer, you're a queen, and I'm just glad to be in your presence.
Well, actually, I was gonna say this later, but one of the things that I remember the first time I talked to you via telephone, I think my questions when I was interviewing artists at that time was asking them to define African hip hop. And I don't even know if you remember that question, but I think your response to me was something along the lines of hip hop is hip hop. It don't matter who's doing it, hip hop is hip hop. And I was like, oh, okay. And I had to kind of go back and reconfigure mentally how I was thinking about it and approaching it. Instead of thinking that Africans do it differently, it's like, no, it's you represent where you're from, but hip hop is hip hop. And that kind of my whole approach to how I kind of the rest of the research I would then do, that like kind of I had to change directions a bit and be like, okay, let me, so I definitely remember that being kind of, because as a researcher you can't think you know everything. You have to kind of, and I've always approached it from the perspective that the culture has to be involved and has to have a voice. And if the culture is like, no, you're wrong, then you got to listen and then, take that into consideration. So
bring it back, rewind.
Exactly. So by way of introduction, so you were born in Ghana and you lived in the Ivory Coast, from what I understand. And while you're in Ivory Coast, you participated in the hip hop scene in the Ivory Coast. And I'm assuming that's where you also learned French. Correct. And then from what I read online, sometimes I find out that that's not always the case, what I read, but you also studied for a bit in Egypt as well as Malta. And then you came to the US, specifically to Philly, where, for college, got involved in the rap scene there in the early 2000s. And then dropped the first album as a member of the rap duo Ambassadoz with Akan, and the first album was Travelwyze. Is that?
Yes. Yeah,
correct?
that's 100% accurate.
So then I guess, the first question is 2004, you dropping this album, you're living in Philly. How would you describe the hip hop landscape in Philly when you arrive there and when you're kind of moving around the hip hop scene?
Word. So just want to shout out everybody. Thank y'all for having me. I go by the name of MOA, Minister of Agriculcha. I got that name from my father, who was actually a Secretary of Agriculture in Ghana during the regime of President Liman. We could probably get back into that. But I guess fast forward to coming to Philly. Wow. Before I came to Philly, and this is funny, I was talking to someone today about this. I was talking to a friend of mine. I came to Philly for college. I went to St. Joe's University in Philadelphia. But before I came to the States and to Philly, like I was hip hop. You know, I grew up in the golden era. So like in the 90s, I just embraced hip hop when I was in the Ivory Coast because it just spoke to me, you know, the culture, just the music, the vibe, the element, the spiritual aspect, the social political aspect. It just spoke to me, you know, and like sometimes hip hop chooses people, like we don't necessarily choose hip hop. So before I came here, like I was deep in a culture, right? And it's so funny because when my sister and her best friend met me at the airport at JFK, the first thing I said to them was like, "What's the 411?" And she was just like, "Who is this dude? Like, what are you talking about?" Like, you know, um, Philly, Philly was interesting. Um, at the time that I came here, I met a couple of people who were kind of like in the streets, right? They were knee deep in the culture, um, and you know they kind of knew who was who in Philadelphia. So this is around the time. I don't know if there's any people that are familiar with the Philadelphia hip hop scene, but like the Roots were like really big at that time. And they had a couple of spots. They had this spot called the Five Spot where they would perform and all this stuff. And so luckily, the people that I connected with when I came to Philly knew certain people that were already established in the hip hop industry, right? And so, you know, it kind of made it easy for me to like get around, to learn more about the culture, to get embedded into the culture, to know who's who the producers, who the MCs were, and you know, the one thing that I gotta say about when I first came to Philly, a lot of people, a lot of my friends actually keep tell me about this, is that from the jump, like I never separated myself from African Americans. I'm gonna just weigh it out and be transparent, because you know, there is, I don't want to call it a stigma, but there is even up till now, there is some type of vibe where, you know, some people feel like Africans feel like they're better than African Americans, right? Or, you know, African Americans feel like Africans are backwards, like booty scratchers. You know, we live on trees or whatnot. So like when I came here, like in my mind, like I wanted to be immersed in the African American culture so bad that it just flowed effortlessly for me. You know, the people that I hung out with, St. Joe's was a predominantly Caucasian school. Let me just say that right out. But the people that I hung out were like, they were like from the streets. They were from like West Philly, from North Philly. Uh, you know, they were Rastas, they were 5%ers, you know, and, you know, we held like lessons and we would build on a lot of different things. So, I mean, for me, there wasn't a division of where I came from to where I was at. And I always remember, you know, I can't remember what MC said this, but it's not really about where you're from, it's about where you're at. But I just immersed myself in that culture. And I met one individual named Akan. He was a Ghanaian MC. And he was like the most vivid individual up till now that I have ever met. He was just knowledgeable about everything, about esoteric science, about politics, about hip hop, about Ghanaian traditional culture, and he was a dope MC. You know, he was a really dope MC. So we just kind of clicked. You know, I would just go over to his crib. We would build, and then at some point we decided to do some music. I was studying My major at St. Joe's was management of information systems. So I was like knee deep into computers and technology. I figured out a way to like buy a cheap microphone. I mean, it really wasn't cheap, actually. It was like $800 at that time, which was pretty expensive. It was an AKG 1000 microphone. I had a desktop. I found like a way to get cracked software. I didn't pay for the software. I hope I'm not gonna get in trouble. And I used Acid, and I just figured out a way for us to be self-sufficient and record ourselves. So I would literally haul like, and we didn't have laptops at the time. It was like the desktop, the screen. I would like haul that in my car, in my Volkswagen Jetta, drive over to his crib, set it up, and then we would just like bang out music. He knew all the dope producers in Philly. I mean, the producers for the Roots, not Questlove. There were other producers. This one in particular, E Major, may he rest in peace, who just took to us. He was really interested in like the African culture. So whenever we hung out, he would be over there, and he was like, "Yo, I'm gonna throw y'all some beats." And like his beats were just like, I'm like $10,000 beats. Like I'm just so thankful that he just took to us as individuals, not even just on the hip hop tip, just like as individuals. And he would just throw us stuff. So we had like high powered production. Now the recording wasn't necessarily high powered, right? But at the time, I just figured I would go on. I would read a lot about like how to like mix stuff, and it wasn't perfect, but sometimes like mixing is really about the ears, about what you hear. So I just use what I hear and what I heard, and I just made it work. So like I like to say that I was just blessed to have the right people and to be like in a space at the right time.
So one thing that amazed me in just kind of meeting someone who was Ghanaian in Philly, but also because then I was looking at some of the videos that you had sent, specifically the one where you were on stage with One Love, the Kubalor, and Manifest. Now, I don't know what happened that some forces brought so many Ghanaian MCs to the States at the same time. There's you, there's One Love, there's Manifest, and then there's Blitz the Ambassador, and then there's Akan. So like, were you aware of that was unique, that was something that like, because I can't think of any other country at that time that had that many MCs that were active in the States at one time.
Word.
Were you guys all like in communication with each other, or like was that like something that you all were aware of or even thought about?
I like to think that it was meant to be. I like to think also like Ghanaians are very, what's the right word? A lot of those people like Blitz and One Love and Manifest, we were all just here for college. We were actually in school, right? We left Ghana. Our parents sent us over here to be whatever, doctors or what have you. You know what I mean? Like my parents were like, "You're not gonna be an MC." Nope. You know what I mean? But somehow, and I give away my age or whatnot. During the MySpace days, we had access to each other. We would see the music and we would be like, "Oh, word, he's from Ghana. He's in the music, he's in the hip hop. Let's connect." And it was a selfless vibe, a selfless just like recognition of where we're from. Like Ghanaians we're very friendly people, and like when we see each other in a different part of outside of Ghana, we're like, "Oh, yo, Charlie, what's up?" And we just vibe. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't really think about it. It wasn't something that was second nature to me. It was really just like first nature. Like, oh, word, One Love, let's do a song together. And we just connected on that vibe. And thankfully, around that time, I believe around that time was when these like software started coming out that made it easy for musicians to kind of be self-sufficient and independent. And if you knew how to do it, you just saved a lot of money, And so, yeah, we just communicated and we banged out like just so much music during that time, not even thinking about the business side of it. It was just more about the passion. And we were all like on that same vibe. Like it really wasn't different.
Yeah, I definitely got that from, looking at some of the footage and, not only looking at the footage of yourself and One Love and Manifest and, but also looking at some of the footage of yourself with other artists from the continent. So like looking at some of the stuff with Trinity, with some of the African artists from Trinity and just kind of, and I've started going to Trinity, the hip hop festival at Trinity College. For those who don't know, that Trinity College has this yearly international hip hop festival, and it brings together artists from all over the world, really. But there's always a group that comes from different African countries, whether their artists are based here or actually fly in from the continent. And so it does seem like there's always this sense of, we're here for the love of the culture, that is hip hop culture. And there's this sense of, let's just kind of hop on this beat real quick and drop these 16s and just.
Yeah. I mean, specifically the Trinity thing, I got to give a shout out to Nomadic Wax, Ben Herson and McGee, who I somehow met online, and they just dug my music. They dug my music, and they just decided to push me. Whenever they were doing any projects, they were like, "Yo, you want to jump on this joint?" And of course, I wouldn't hesitate. But I was really fortunate to be able to listen and to be able to hear opportunities that were available. Like I didn't like not back down, but I didn't lose. If any opportunity came my way, if I had to travel or drive to go perform or go record, like I was so passionate about hip hop that I would do it. You know what I mean? And Nomadic Wax, when I signed with them, they just really took it to different heights for me personally. Like we did stuff with BBC, we did stuff with the World Cup Federation. I did stuff with like Ugandan MCs. They were already set up, right? So it was just a plug, like, yo, hook up with this MC in Uganda, hook up with this MC in Tanzania, hook up with this MC, whoever, and like just bang stuff out. So, I guess I was kind of lucky that I linked up with some people who already had like the framework. They had the road and the path for making things happen. And at that point, it was just a matter of just performing, you know what I mean, for me. Yeah, they're really, really good people that I've met along the way, along the path. A lot of them that I'm still, good friends with. Like that's how I met Do Me Right. It's through Nomadic Wax, and we still bang out tracks to this day.
It seems so interesting how like the community, even now, folks who are really kind of involved and engaged in the culture and have these connections to the continent, people are still really connected. There was just this recent global hip hop education conference, and I went to some of the sessions. It was a session on Trinity, and there was a session done by the folks from Heal the Hood out of Cape Town, Emil from Black Noise. And in that session, he was then talking about the artist from Uganda, and I knew who he was talking about. I knew he was talking about Babaluku and those guys. And so, and then he started talking, somebody was asking him about films on hip hop in Africa. And he was like, well, have you seen Democracy in Dakar? And so I'm just like, because he knows Nomadic Wax. And then Do Me, the platform that we're live streaming on is Words, Beats, and Life, which is based in DC, which is also where Do Me is. McGee from Nomadic Wax is here. And so Do Me and Nomadic Wax are also plugged in with Words, Beats, and Life. And so it's like this. And then Words, Beats, and Life is also down with Babaluku. They've done some stuff in Uganda. So it's like this interconnected thing. And so when I went to Senegal, I contacted Ben and McGee, and they gave me contact numbers and everything. So yeah, it's just really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It's you know, the I'm so passionate about the path, and I always keep saying like hip hop chose me because when growing up in Ivory Coast, I was obviously a French speaking country, but a lot of my friends weirdly we're from East Africa. We're from like Tanzania and we're from like Kenya. You know what I mean? And like at that time, like I wasn't into like East African hip hop, but just by that connection, years later, when they would put me on to that stuff, and I was in the States, I'd be like, oh bam, like those are my peeps, regardless. You know what I mean? Just because of growing up with people from East Africa, um, and it just goes to understanding that like hip hop is such a powerful force.
Mhm.
It's such a powerful force, like not just like how it originated, from Jamaica with DJ Kool Herc and all that in the States, but a lot of people like when I was in the Ivory Coast, my friends who were in the States before I came to the United States would come back to the Ivory Coast with like VHS cassette tapes, you know what I mean, of like Yo MTV Raps and a video music box. And that was my portal into the culture. And I would just be amazed by like, the Big Daddy Kanes and the Fat Boys and the Slick Rick and the Rakims. I remember one time once I once I first listened to Big Daddy, once I saw videos of Big Daddy Kane and he had the slits in the eyebrows, like I literally went in the mirror and like did the same thing. Like my parents were like, "The hell is wrong with you, boy? You better make them eyebrows grow back." Like it was that serious for me. But the proliferation of the music videos and the music was a big thing. They bring back cassette tapes, they would bring back the music videos, and I would just like study them and watch them and like the special eds and the salt and pepper and like do all the formation, all the dance moves and everything. And it just spoke to me. And yeah, that's why I just feel like sometimes hip hop, not only is it a powerful force, but like it's a spiritual force, and sometimes it just chooses you.
Yeah, yeah. So I definitely also want to kind of I don't want to take up, all of the interview, but if folks have questions, if you're on the Facebook feed, post the question there and we will definitely make sure it gets asked. Okay, so I do have a student, Haja. Go ahead and you can unmute and ask.
Hi, my question was I did like your global summit like video on YouTube, and I wanted to ask with your lyrics, you said that the song what classes in session, I think,
Mm.
or open session, that it connect to what was going on at the time. And that was 5 months ago. Do you think it is important now? And do you feel like it connects, especially with your course that goes like Count Your Blessings? And how does it connect to what's happening now?
What up, Haja? Thanks for the question. Class in Session was a special song for me. Shout out to Edson Sean, who's a musician and MC. He plays the guitar, he plays the piano, he's a singer. He is like, I want to be like him when I grow up. And I met Ed through my wife, who's also a musician. Shout out to Rafia. Um, and he is also an engineer. He's also he mixed some of my wife's songs, and I would be there while they were working on stuff. And he reminds me of Black Thought. Black Thought is one of my favorite MCs. So we always just like said like, man, I can't wait. Like, hopefully we can do music together. And so once the pandemic hit, I have a son who's now 18. He's actually about to graduate high school. I just noticed a lot of stresses, a lot of different things that the kids were going through at the time, not only just by being in school and by being online, um, but just the whole change, just in this whole new world order. And so, I was just like, you know what? I would love to write something for my son, you know, to let him know that, you know, regardless of what external pressures he's facing in school or in social aspect, that he can look deep within and know that what's outside of him cannot destroy what's inside of him. I'm gonna break that down a little bit for you. My son was basically just going through a lot of stresses with like the new way of teaching. And he was like, yo, I don't get it. I don't get this whole Zoom thing. Like they just give us more work and like, it's really hard to understand, you know, the teachings. And, you know, I just decided to use that energy, even if he didn't understand it at this point, hopefully a couple years down the line, if I'm not here, you know, he would watch that video and he'd be like, yo, Pops had my back. Pops was really trying to hold me down, you know, what have you. But to your question, Haj, I definitely feel that it still holds. I mean, the hook basically just went like, count your blessings. You know, so that was just like, don't be stressed out. Just know that regardless of what you're going through, there's a bigger plan for you. And I personally still feel like that holds. Like that's, to me, that's a universal lesson. You know, the world can exert a lot of pressure on you. And if you don't have like that mind over matter, you know, and if you don't have a strong sense of self, it's very easy for people to be, you know, to lose themselves, you know. And I wanted him to, more importantly, understand that there's a bigger plan out there for him, and that whatever it is that he was going through at the time, you know, he could overcome it, you know. And I always like talk to him about how a diamond is formed, you know. It's actually pressurized, and all that pressure is what makes it be so valuable, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, I'd love to think that it's one of those joints that's like classic, no matter when. You know, life repeats itself. You know, what we're going through now, people went through years ago. You know what I mean? Everything is everything. It's all just a cycle, you know? And once you recognize that, if you have that knowledge of self, you just understand that you're just a speck, a piece of sand in the whole universe, but you're playing a role. And if you accept that role, if you're in tune with the universe, you could do amazing things. So, I mean, for me, it was just basically like a, you know, basic instructions before leaving Earth type of song for my son. And I decided to do that specifically because like I wanted to relate to him, you know. We just talk about a lot of things. He means a lot to me. And, you know, I wanted him to understand also, you know, through hip hop, that he's a king, he's gonna be successful, and not to let anyone or anything outside of him tell him otherwise.
Thank you.
Dupree, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question. First, I just wanted to say that I love that song. I've listened to it so many times. And yes, no, I found it when I was doing research. How important it is to you. So I love that. But when I was doing research, I saw that you have a very diverse background of just where you grew up and the different places that you've experienced. So I was wondering how that impacts your music and how it's influenced your work.
I'm so sorry, Dupree. I was changing earphones because the other one blacked out on me. Could you please repeat your question?
Yeah, of course. When I was doing research, I just saw that you have a very diverse background of where you've grown up and lived. And so I was wondering how that impacts your music and how it influences your work.
Oh, man. Thanks for the question. I mean, I definitely feel like, and part of what as I mentioned at the beginning, me being in Ghana right now is because my dad passed away 2 weeks ago. My father was just such an amazing person. I'll just give you a breakdown because I feel like to answer the question, I kind of have to explain where I come from, and that's from both of my parents. My dad he went through a lot in Ghana and as a child, and basically made his way through sports. He used to do pole vaulting and running, sprinting, and he was part of the Olympics, the 1960s Olympics. He was the delegation in Italy. The Ethiopian delegation basically was so impressed with his sportsmanship that they invited him to finish his education in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And while he was there, he met the Emperor Haile Selassie. He Ethiopia at the time had a very tight bond with Ghana, the Casablanca bloc, and he invited my father, who was a young student, over to his palace, and my dad presented him with some traditional Ghanaian artifacts, and he in turn gave my father a scholarship, a grant to attend school at Stanford University. So my father had, he got educated in the States, but he came back to Ghana and, became the Minister of Youth and Development, and later on the Minister of Agriculture, which is where I get my name from. But, I don't forget and I don't take lightly the fact that we are privileged. My siblings and I are privileged because due to his work, he was able to send us to school, like I was saying earlier, in Malta, in France, in the UK, back to Ghana, and then eventually to college in the United States. And for me, just being in all those countries, it just opened up my mind to the fact that we're all humans. We may be from different places, speak a different dialect, but underneath the skin, it's the same color blood. You know what I mean? And so just being in all these different places just created a type of a bond, understanding, a universal outlook on everything. I was never just like local. I saw like the bigger picture. And I think that always just goes into, a lot of that played into my music with the people that I met, the people that I did music with. I always just wanted to expand and reach further than just, my local, where I was from. I was always, intrigued by other cultures, other dialects, the way people do things in different places. And I love to think that I was able to reflect that in my music.
Okay, Bontu, go ahead.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Well, I just wanted to ask, I'm also from Ethiopia, and I know that music in the African household is very frowned upon, and your dad being very successful, especially in politics in the economic world, what kind of impact did they have in influencing your music life, or how did you take their words or their choices of your future outlook in terms of music?
Word. Bantu, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes.
Do you speak Amharic?
Yes, I do speak Amharic.
Eminent. Word. I think I was lucky enough because my father went to school in Cali during the 60s. He has a stack of records. I'm talking about like old school funk, Al Green, Nina Simone. He was into like classical music. He's got a stack, and I got all them stacks. I'm bringing all them joints back with me to the States when I come back. A lot of them probably you can't even find in the States right now. Watch, I'm gonna get original joints. But every Sunday, I remember vividly, we had a ritual with him and my mom. We would just dance. He would put on Al Green, and just as a family, my two sisters and my brother, we would just like dance and just like vibe out. I was probably like 10, 11, 12, but music ran deep in the family. Like as much as he didn't want me to come out, be like a musician or whatnot, he loved music. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of my siblings love music as well. And so it was always part of me. It wasn't something that, I forced myself to be into. Like I appreciated that aspect of growing up, and I appreciated, you know, him doing that for us. And I would remember when he would go to work, he had a record player. It wasn't a DJ set; it was just like a record player. And somehow, after watching all these videos of like the DJs, I would literally take like Al Green record. I figured out where the break was, and I would scratch. I probably messed up his record player. The needle, like it was not meant to scratch. You know what I'm saying? But I said, I gotta try it. And like I would just feel good, you know what I mean? But like, yeah, that was definitely part of growing up. Like every Sunday, it was a ritual. He just played music. We would all just like dance, and it would be like to that old school funk, you know, which actually is a lot of the prehistory of a lot of what the producers sampled back in the days, and even up till now. So like when I got into hip hop, I was like, oh, word, Al Green, I know where that break comes from. Like it was just, you know, I appreciated and I appreciate him for that.
All right, any other? Out of curiosity, so in looking at again, when you were like mid, I guess 2004, 2005, 2006, up to around the World Cup 2010, looking at the presence of artists from the continent in the States, you had a lot of artists, you know, who were kind of here again for college. So, you know, a lot of the artists you were talking about came here for college, and they were MCs before they came. I think that's also important to mention, because a lot of, you know, folks were doing this before they even stepped foot in the States. Now, when I think we look at a lot of artists, and it was interesting because I had it when I interviewed Bliss the Ambassador, I think it was like, this was right after Burial of Kojo dropped, or not dropped, but was released. It wasn't the album, it was a film. But after it was released, he kind of talked about that era of you all kind of paving this way for the artists that would come later. And basically saying that in many ways, you all really kind of help make it, I don't want to say easier, but help pave the way for a lot of the African artists that would come later and find a lot more success in the mainstream industry in the States. Right. And so I wanted to kind of get your views on, well, two things. One, the role African artists are playing in the hip hop industry in the States now. And then also, why is it so hard for, in the US, for people to distinguish between Afro beats and hip hop in Africa? Like sometimes I'm talking about, you know, hip hop in Africa. Like, for example, I had a conversation with some folks at this US hip hop magazine. I'm not going to say the name of the magazine, but, you know, I was talking to them and they were talking about wanting to do some stuff in Africa and hip hop. And they were kind of name dropping some artists that they'd worked with. And they mentioned Davido. And I was like, well, Davido's not a hip hop artist. And the look on their face, I'm like, but you're a hip hop magazine. How do you not? Why are you so? And this is not the first time. So there's a lot of times that people will say, "Oh, Burna Boy," and I'm like, "No, Burna Boy is not a rapper either." So I guess looking at the artists that are rappers, whether they be first generation, second generation, because you know you've got folks like Nipsey Hussle, rest in peace, who was second generation, but who was an African artists. I don't, in terms of first generation, I can't think of anybody right now off the top of my head. So yeah, looking at kind of your views on what's happening now.
Yeah. You know, the funny thing is while we were going through that whole era, you know, we didn't know what was to come, right? We were just doing it out of the love. And, you know, a lot of people were not, quote unquote, successful in a sense of gaining mainstream recognition, right? But it was mainly on an underground level where the fans were, right? To the question, to the veto comment, I think, I think it's also mainly the machine that's the music industry, right? The music industry, radio, what have you, is gonna push what's popping at the time, right? And people who are not necessarily deep or on the underground level may not necessarily distinguish between a rapper, an MC, and like Afro beats. To them, if someone like Drake is singing, that's hip hop. You know what I mean? Um, you know, whatever they hear, I feel like mainstream, the music industry has a lot to do with the perception of what people think is hip hop and what is not hip hop. So a lot of people who haven't really been following the trends would just be like, oh yeah, Davido is a rapper, or Wizkid is a rapper, or Shatta Wale is a rapper, But I think it's very interesting as well because like I go back now and I listen to like some of the joints that we released back then, and I'm like, yo, we were just ahead of our time. We were just doing things that people weren't ready for. And like you said, maybe that paved the way for, other people. Like I personally don't know if that's the case. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But it's a beautiful thing though, I think it's a beautiful thing that people, that trend is a continual process of taking little bits from the old and adding it to what you are. Like right now in Ghana, I really don't think there's a lot of MCs. There's very few that I would consider an MC. There's rappers and Afro beats. Now they're really big into this whole drill vibe, which comes from the UK. But there's very few like what I would consider an MC in Ghana. Like I definitely consider Sark an MC, Casey Arthur, and the younger generation, which is I think is interesting, are actually holding on to more of the MCing than a lot of the other folks. I get in trouble for saying that, but I think it's a beautiful thing that here in Ghana, like a lot of the people that I consider as MCs really study. They study the art and they study the culture and they know who the pioneers are and they pay respect to the pioneers. They know where they came from in order to know where they're going. So like I personally, like I think that's a beautiful thing. But yeah, I think the record industry, capitalism is capitalism, man. Like it's really gonna be about making money, at the end of the day. That's really what it comes down to. And unfortunately, that's really what's gonna be pushed on the airwaves, and that has some type of influence on what people feel is hip hop versus Afro beats or whatever. I love Afro beats, don't get it twisted. Like I vibe out all day Afro beats, I'm good. Like I came into this game like dancing, so like I like that dance vibe as well. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, it's very interesting. I think some of these individuals also have an agenda. Like they may not necessarily want to push hip hop. They may just want to be like, okay, we're gonna push whatever is gonna be more profitable. This guy's a little bit too controversial. Because hip hop really started as news. It was a way for people to be up on what's going on in a different locale, in a different hood. And like, yo, you listen to stuff that was going on the West Coast and the East Coast, you would be like, wow, they're doing the same thing, they're just doing it differently, But with the Public Enemies and the Stetsasonic, it was a powerful movement, a very social, political, powerful movement. And that just kind of got diluted as people figured out that they could make money off of it. You know what I'm saying? Word.
Yeah, I mean, Ghana, the Ghanaian industry, hip hop, I always feel like, or always say the hip hop in Ghana, the hip hop scene in Ghana is unlike any other country in Africa that I've seen. Just the way that, because it it doesn't break down the way it does in other places. So there wasn't like this graffiti culture. There isn't this big breakdance culture. You didn't have, I mean, it's just very, very different. And you also kind of have this hip life where people blend stuff. And so where you move over to like Senegal and like the hip hop, the MCs would never do a pop song. You know, they would never. It's like, what? So it's just a very different scene.
Yeah.
Iriana, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question. Then we're gonna wrap it up after this one.
So there might be a chance, I don't know if your dad ever talked to you about this, but during the time of like Kwame Nkrumah's rule, do you think that revolutionary sentiment and sort of this new sentiment of Pan-Africanism came into Ghanaian hip hop and was expressed through it, or in the Gold Coast?
Hey, Ariana, thanks for the question. That's a good question. I'm tempted to say Ghanaians were, through Kwame Nkrumah, very Pan-African. But I'm not sure if a lot of the MCs and the Ghanaian MCs were Pan-Africanist, because from what I understand, and I could be wrong, they weren't really like looking to the neighbor to see like, yo, what are you doing in hip hop? What are they doing in hip hop in Nigeria at the time? Maybe now they are, but like at the time, they weren't really. But maybe that sense of Pan-Africanism that was instilled, through Kwame Nkrumah, maybe kind of opened up some type of portal for people. But kind of going back to what MCI was saying, there wasn't that much graffiti writing, but there was breakdancing. Like you look at Reggie Rockstone, he was like hot, he was he was doing all that stuff, and Ghanaians were really big into dance. And I think like that was kind of their connection into breakdancing, which kind of led into hip hop, right? But I mean, for me, I can speak for me, Ariana, personally, that Pan-African outlook definitely influenced my music, because not only were my parents staunch Pan-Africanists, my mother was a major in the Ghanaian armed forces. My father was a politician. So like you could imagine what type of conversations were happening at the dinner table. But they just always instilled in me to be proud of Africa, and that Ghana is not the only country in Africa. Like there's a lot of other opportunities in the continent, and to be proud of the whole continent and to be willing to learn about the continent. So my upbringing personally taught me to kind of connect and be willing to connect with different people from different cultures, especially in Africa, and made me just be it made me really be a proud Ghanaian, be proud of where we came from, be proud of what we're giving out into the world. And, just to be like a good person, but like my pops was a staunch Pan-Africanist. And I feel like a lot of the direction in my music was definitely due to that upbringing and that knowledge and understanding that I got at the dinner table,
All right. Thank you. So we're gonna stop there because I know it's definitely getting late there. So I definitely want to thank you. I want to also shout out Words, Beats, and Life for making their platform available for us to live stream. Thank you, Mazi, for letting us live stream. Words, Beats, and Life kind of came on as a partner to kind of, allow us to live stream. And I know that they're going to be also helping to moderate some of the other sessions. We weren't able to get one for today, but I know that some of the other sessions are going to come and be able to moderate. So But thank you. And we will definitely kind of have, your IG links on the show notes when we release this, because we'll also be releasing this as a podcast episode. So, but thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you, everyone that was asking questions and just being engaged with everything. And definitely, check me out, the.official.moa. You'll get all that information. And I hope, definitely that the music speaks to you. It's kind of hard to find my music because there's a period of time where I didn't release music and I was just focused on life. My son was born. But I guess just the point of a lot of the stuff that I did was really deep and had a message behind it, so I'm glad that a few of you were like, oh my God, I love this song or what have you, because that just makes me know that I was in the right place at the right time. You know what I mean? So much love. Yeah, we shall connect.
To him, son, there's a lot you gotta learn still, but keep your head up, you'll fly higher than the birds will. I was in your position, I know it gets real when the world affects who you're looking at in the mirror, but your royalty in every way that you appear, and you control your destiny. There's nothing else that you should fear. As black men in this country, we gotta stick together, start a business, put the money up, learn how to get it.